Okay, all right. So for roll call, as of right now, we have Julie McKenzie, Kelly Tarbell, Katie Benson, you said is on, I can't, okay. Myself and Jeff Hance is here as an alternate, I think for Scott. Right, I'm looking for a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I will motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? Julie? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, the agenda is approved. Now I'm looking for an approval of the minutes for the January 2nd meeting.
Seems like so long ago. I will make a motion that we approve the January 2nd, 2025 board meeting minutes.
Is there a second? Julie, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is Kate voting? I can't hear or see her.
I can hear her.
Here,
There she is.
okay, all right. All right, great. Okay, so the minutes are approved. That brings us to our first public communication. If there's any public that wishes to speak. Okay, move right on into superintendent's report.
A lot of stuff here. I think the biggest piece is we started getting our first information out of the legislative session. They are kind of in an information gathering mode right now. Most of what they're doing is they're calling in experts to talk about things that are related to education funding and whatnot. One of the bigger things that's happening is that they've been talking about a plan or a bill to allow districts to start shutting down their smaller schools. So that's one that's a little bit more frequent. A lot of the others, like I said, they're more in kind of planning phase. They know what their goals are in terms of dealing with education spending, but they're just trying to get background information. There's a law out there that they're working on that's probably going to bar cell phones in any public school as well. That's up for discussion. In terms of the district, there are a couple of work groups that the principals are engaged in. We've got the student support group. They are taking a look at our special education numbers, how we provide supports to our regular education students, reaching out to the research base and reaching out to some other schools that have had quite a bit of success to try to get those things implemented, hopefully by the end of the year. We've got the emergency operating plan and threat assessment protocols that are being worked on as well. Make sure that we've got that completely updated by the July 1st deadline. We have a group that is working on the annual mandatory training that all teachers have to go through to make sure that we're in compliance with everything, that nothing is getting missed. And then we have a group that's also making sure that we're in compliance with everything we've got to do to receive federal funding. I think most people have already heard about the governor's education restructuring plan. The talk behind the scenes is that it's not going to be 5 districts. It'll be somewhere between 30 and 40. Is kind of what they're planning. But I think it's been handed off to the legislature at this point in time to allow them to provide some significant input. Whether or not the time frame for it is realistic is of concern, not next year, but the year after. It's supposed to all be in place. Folks know about PowerSchool. PowerSchool is our student information system that we keep all our grades, records, demographic info, everything that's required by the state of Vermont. The Agency of Education, they had a breach. Had nothing to do with our school. This was at the PowerSchool systems itself, and so they are taking care of it. The tech team here has been doing a really good job keeping on top of what's happening and helping get letters out just to keep the community informed. We are in the process, they probably went out on Friday, of sending out the results of our K-3 universal reading screener that's required by the state. That's odd. And so folks should be getting results, but only if you have a student that is significantly below proficient. The executive orders have been a topic of discussion for quite a while. One of the ones seemed to do away with LGBTQ rights. In talking with the Agency of Education, they have said that those rights are enshrined in state law and are unaffected. We also put together a plan and a protocol if ICE agents show up at any of our schools and how to interact with those folks. In terms of curriculum, there was a lot of concern that the federal government would be dictating the curriculum. That is protected by the actual Constitution. That is delegated to the states as a right. And that's about it. It's been a little bit busy this last month, unless there's questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Rob?
Can you say more, Lane, about what you're hearing about the education restructuring? I know you mentioned that what you're hearing is there may be some consensus around a reduction in the number of school districts. Are you hearing about any of the other aspects? For example, the funding component?
The things that they're looking at are more about how to move forward in fixing education funding. My impression is that the governor's plan was a starting point to get people talking and get people active. Like I said, what we've been hearing is that, they're actually potentially looking at, 30 to 40 districts instead of just the 5. In terms of...
When you say they, you mean the legislature as a way of compromise?
I don't know if it's about compromise. I think it's just about, it's the only way that the state can continue to operate. There's no way in heck it could operate with 5 districts.
Got it. Okay. And what about state level support for infrastructure?
So they've talked a little bit about, of course, they've been doing this for 5 years now and never gotten anywhere, about revising the state, I forgot what the name they call it, but basically the matching funds. That they put on a moratorium about 25 years ago. So that's always on the agenda. I don't know if there's any hope or not of that coming to fruition, especially given the fact that the way the ed funding is this year, everybody's going to see another pretty good increase, at least like 6 or 7%. And that's with, not increasing, their own spending. That's just to keep things, level service across the state. But again, they're kind of, like I said, they're in information gathering mode. They know that they're talking about potentially, consolidating districts, closing schools, but they've got experts coming in and they're taking a look at some of the data that the state has from the AOE just to try to make sense of it and figure out the best path to move forward. Like I said, they were talking about, at least one little group there, about slowing things down and doing it in a different pattern by starting to look at the small schools first and providing districts with the ability to shut them down with a year's notice to the community. So that's potentially a bill that is coming. I think their idea is that we don't need to make all these major consolidations at the state level. If folks take advantage of this, this will probably solve the problem. Yes.
Heard that before.
There we go. Other questions or thoughts or?
No? Okay. You, was that you?
No, I'll be good. I will bite my tongue and drink more caffeine.
All right. If there's nothing more for Lane, no further questions, we'll move into the TRSU Facilities Director report. I know Todd said he has a couple of games and would not be able to make it. Are you going to fill in for him, or do we want to?
Yeah, there's not too much that's going on there. In terms of what's happening this month, over this vacation, we've got the folks coming in to do some source testing for PCBs at the high school. That's the primary thing that's happening. They are coming in and they are testing materials beyond what the state requires. Part of that is for kind of twofold. Some of it is to provide information to the lawsuit, the class action lawsuit that's going against Monsanto, because the more things that are contaminated, the more things that they should be cleaning up. And to be honest with the board, I'm hoping we can get a new school out of it. So that's one of the goals, but that's the big thing that's happening right now. Thoughts or questions?
Any questions? No? Okay. All right, then we can move into curriculum director's report.
And Louisa is here.
Hi, Louisa.
Meet all of you. I recognize some of the members of the other board meeting I attended. I have PowerPoint. Lena, do I have permission to share? Can you give me permission to share my?
Yeah, let me double check. Those tools. There you go. That lets you in?
Try again. I think I'm in. Yes. Thank you so much. Let me just magnify this one. Won't allow me to. Sorry. Won't allow me to magnify this one for the
Slideshow.
Yes, I see. I think you are seeing my presentation. Let me try. This one is always limiting.
Louisa, if you click slideshow,
Yeah.
it should make it bigger.
It's just that it's not allowing me to change the cursor. I need to. It did it to me last time again. Sorry for this. You want to,
That looks fun though.
Is Julie on?
She's down in Florida still though.
okay. Just
Yeah, Louisa, it's you can't just take the cursor as is and hit slideshow.
and
Yep, you were just there to the right.
no, I
Top
know.
right.
Okay.
There you
So,
go.
speak to me last time. I have a few issues with this machine. We're looking into this. Okay. So nice to meet all of you. I haven't met last time. I have a short presentation. Some of the current initiatives are we continue the OGAP training for the math teachers, and we are just about to launch with the Read Vermont initiative with the state of Vermont, and we have been selected to participate in this important initiative in collaboration with the STEM Center. We have a group of teachers who are interested in this initiative, and then they will receive individual coaching. And the OGAP training, Julie is working on it. She is continues to provide training to our math teachers, and is all about proportional reasoning, fractions, ratios, and so forth. We had the in-service on January 21st. It was very successful. The teachers really liked the format. This was a format launched by my predecessor, Emma Bastola, and we will continue to use this format. We received a very, very positive feedback. I'm going to launch into the graphs. Last time, I think I was taking a little too much time. I'm going to show you some graphs from the results of the winter testing. These are the DBELs, which is a test that assesses the standardized skills of the students as compared to state and national standards. The next one is the MAPS, and this is, you need to go back? Question? No. These are the MAPS. The MAP test is a test that assesses the growth of a student over time, and is a progressive test, which means if the students answer a question correctly, the next one is going to be slightly harder, and so forth. And this is really a growth reading of the students' skills. And if you look at these percentages, we actually they're not too bad as compared to other districts I worked for. And what you don't see in these graphs are the students approaching proficiency, which altogether is really, really good. The students are in good shape. If you look at the percentages of students showing proficiency in math, this scale is actually smaller in the graph. The area of the graph is smaller as compared to the other one. So these percentages are actually higher. And you can see how our students are performing from grades 1 through 6, and the average for the district. And then a new assessment that we're using is IXL, and this is an indicator of the individual skills of the students. Is actually measuring the individual performance of the students, and it reveals the skills the students need to practice to ace the state tests. Now, all of these tests results are combined into with a software called the Forefront, and altogether, all these numbers and percentages and performance and the skills, they really give us the profile of a graduate. And we look forward to using this data to provide individualized instruction for the students, to refine instructional strategies and help the students achieve higher academic success, and possibly to fill some of those gaps. What questions do you have?
Lisa, any of the graphs that you have, is there like comparative information so we can see what they were prior? I mean, are we in an uptrend, a downtrend, holding steady?
The first,
Okay, I couldn't, the one with the red and the green, I couldn't read it, it's too small.
so I think that one was the fall, the other is winter testing, and you'll see that the red is decreasing in most of the grades. But do you mind throwing that back up?
I can bring it up.
I apologize. She's rushing a little bit because I told her to focus just on the graph, so it's my fault.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, this, and I need to share again, so let me see if I can do it. Sorry, this is the one that you want to look at.
I don't know if there's a way. Can you just talk about this one a little bit? If this is the comparative
It's
one?
actually, so this compares the skills of the students against the state and national standards. So if you look at these areas, the students in red are those that did not, they're not there yet. The yellow are the students who are approaching the standard. The green master the standard, and the blue are above and beyond proficiency. So everywhere where you see that this area in red is greater than the previous one is where the students actually regressed. And this one on the 6th grade, this you will see a whole red bar only because at the time I pulled these results, so the sixth graders had not finished the testing, and at that time only one student had the test done, so don't be thrown off by this one. We can look at all of the other ones here, and you see in general there's been a little regression.
Each one is showing regression?
Pretty much.
And that bottom one, I believe, Louisa, does that say all under 6th grade?
That's correct.
So that would be overall?
For the district, yeah.
Okay, so we have students regressing in skills.
But the details really compares the ability of the students against the state and national standards. And this does show regression. Yeah.
So there's clearly work they need to do. The other thing, and I actually, I don't know if the Dibbles does it. I know the MAPS would. The testing at different windows, most of the tests actually get harder, right? Because the students have learned more. So if you're looking at, the fall, the middle of the year, and you're looking at the springtime, what the students are getting tested on usually gets a little bit more difficult. I don't think that's true with the Dibbles though.
Okay.
But I can find out. I talked with Emma on
It doesn't get harder, but I think that the score range changes, I
The
believe.
curve changes.
Yeah. I don't usually do it because it's for such young kids, but.
Emma's talked with her on Friday, mentioned that this is not atypical for new programs that are going into place.
Okay.
Takes a year to 3 to start getting a bump.
And the new program being the new curriculum, not the new testing, because the testing they've done for a couple of years, correct? Yeah.
Can I just, Adrian, I don't know if, I don't know if this is what's underlying your question, but data teams are looking and do every benchmark window at this data and drilling down deeper into it to try to make decisions about how to adjust instruction to address the regression and how to continue to grow where we're not seeing regression. So I don't know if that was what was underlying your question, but there is work underway within the data teams in the buildings to address what the data story is telling us.
And also the intervention, which we're already working on. Yeah.
And then to your other question about for the other data that is in Luisa's presentation, we can present it in different ways that would show you trend over time going in the future if that's what you're more interested in seeing.
I personally would find that helpful. I don't want to speak directly for everybody else.
No,
on the board,
I think
but
it's good to see it in different ways. Personally, I had a question and I'm sorry it fell out of my head. I don't know, something, Julie, you just said that made me think, and now, is there you do data, how do you do data teams? Are they by grade level, by building, by district, or some combination thereof? And maybe that's a Louisa question. I don't know who I should be asking it of at the moment.
Julie, you want to talk about the data teams?
Sure. Yeah. So in the elementary schools, all 4 elementary schools have data teams that meet weekly, with the exception of Cavendish, which is meeting alternating because of the way they've structured them. They are grade level based. Generally speaking, if the school has a pre-K, then they'll do pre-K K. They'll pair up grades. So there'll be a pre-K K, a 1-2, a 3-4, a 5-6. Some of the buildings do it slightly differently, but it's sort of a grade band data team discussion that they're having. And I think the reason for that is it's, in our small schools with one teacher, it's not very meaningful to have a conversation with yourself. So you're trying to have some collaborative discussion about the data. That's why they partner up the grades. I can't speak to what's going on at Green Mountain in the middle and high school with regard to data teams. I know they have some professional learning community work and they're using their Ski Tuesdays, and I believe they're looking at data there. But I'm not as familiar with the structure that they're using in 7 through 12 at the moment.
Thank you.
So would it be helpful for the whole board to see more like the data in a trend form, or time? Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think just having one piece of data doesn't tell us non-educators the story.
Okay, we can prepare presentations with the trends for the next meetings.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. Does anyone else have any questions for Louisa?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what data exists to show, but I mean, I always appreciate seeing like a year over year analysis. So I don't know if that's possible, but and then also, I guess, more explanation about the sort of root cause investigation to the extent that you see, trends that are, possibly concerning or possibly triggering some kind of further investigation. I'd be interested to know more about what you conclude about some of the root cause issues.
There are a couple of things that one were already mentioned. The most important one is this new curricular resource. So that will take time. And also some of these tests we're using are new, like iExcel. The idea is to implement it K through 12. We're not there yet. So there are some steps that we are still working on. So they were already brought up. But yes, we can look into this.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, now we're going to move on. So that brings us to the financial update.
And Cheryl's out. I talked with her before, I think it was on Friday. Everything is actually really good in terms of the spending. Typically, you're looking for us to spend about 8.77% of the budget every month, right, And I think we are 5 to 6% in the black based upon that conversation. I mean, there is some additional spending that happens over the summer that's going to use it up, but we look to be kind of right where we want to be in terms of the budgeting piece. I've had or tried to run 3 open forums. I've been at them. We have not had a turnout. Not at the Ludlow Mount Hollies. The Green Mountain one, I had one person come in, and she said, "Oh, I'll do it at Green Mountain this week, and hopefully there'll be more people there." So she's going to tune in when we're over at the high school on Wednesday. So that's where that's at. So I'm hoping we get some more information. I have been hearing back on the little articles that have been going out. The second one is done. I just have to send it out. It seems to be getting the word around.
Okay. All right. So old business. If there's no questions about financing. No. Okay. So old business negotiations update.
Negotiations, we had a little bit of a problem for a meeting or two. Poor Chris, our legal counsel, had a fall at home. And took him off his feet for a little bit. He is back. We're meeting with the support staff tomorrow. I think that's either the third meeting or the fourth, and then we have the teachers next week, and they will flip-flop each week, which one we're meeting with. We've discussed the proposals. We did start negotiating, literally. Usually if you're just discussing the proposals, it's a rationale behind it, but we have been talking back and forth at both.
Any questions regarding the negotiation?
And then Jean is here, but we're almost to her anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a new hire.
Yeah. Mary, you want to talk on Angela?
Okay. We're very fortunate that we have Angela Hurd that has applied for the Chester Andover Elementary Special Educator. Angela comes with a great wealth of experience. She's has an associate's degree from Community College of Vermont, medical assisting, and from the University of Vermont, Bachelor of Science in Medical Technology. And she's pursuing through the University of Vermont a master's in special education. And she has owned and operated a daycare preschool for 7 years. And she's currently at Chester Andover as a paraeducator for 7 years. She's been there, and she has a knowledge of the special education process. She's been trained in several areas. She's has been trained in multi-tiered systems of support, trauma-informed practices, as well as many special ed trainings. And she works really well with the staff and families. And she's committed to student learning and personalized instruction. And we're very fortunate to have somebody this time of year that has applied for the position. And she comes well recommended by Joey Blaine and Nicole Lutz and Amy Hamlet, and another teacher from her school. It is Mackenzie Ramsell. So they've all written nice recommendations, and she really would like to move forward with that hire. I think we'd be fortunate to have her.
Been in Chester this whole time.
Yeah. Working as a para, I believe. We had one special educator move over to the high school, and this would be going in for that position.
When is it anticipated she'll finish her master's?
2020. Oh, let me just see on it. There's a resume. It says May 2026.
And we did put in for provisional for her just in case, and that is going through just fine with the state.
All right, so
And that will be 2 years, so it will cover.
Yep.
That will be good.
all right. Any questions regarding this hire?
I will make motion that we accept the recommendation to hire Angela Hurd as special educator for the TRSU.
Second. So all in favor of hiring Angela Hurd?
Aye.
Opposed? Expired. Excellent. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move into the policy governance. I see that Janina has joined us under the name of Horace. Those of you online, I don't know if this is something that you can share. Okay. We have a handout here that we'll put up for you guys. Basically this is just a step-by-step, what are our next steps and, going forward with policy governance. And then we as a group are going to develop our first policy today. And we are going to do one that shouldn't be too onerous at all. All right, all yours, Janine.
Great, thanks. As Adrienne points out, my name is Jean Collins-Deweese, not Horace Manley. Up until last Saturday, I was executive director of the Horace Mann League. I stepped down from that position, and that's what my Zoom account is still in. And when I saw it come up, I assumed I could go in and rename myself, but your account settings doesn't let me do that. So tonight, you will know me as Horace Mann League. But my name is actually Jean Collins-Deweese, and most of you know me already, but just to remind you, I am a retired superintendent from Vermont. I was superintendent for 17 years in 2 districts, and most recently 8 years in the Rutland Northeast Supervisory Union, which is where I learned policy governance by learning alongside my board, just like all of you are about to do. I also learned, by the way, alongside Lane in his past district, because he brought in Marion Carver when she was still training, to train there. And then I spent this last summer working with an expert in Canada so that I could bring this type of governance to Vermont, because there is a lack of policy governance trainers nationally right now. So I'm entering into that fray. I'm super excited to be here with you tonight. I'm really pleased that you voted to move forward with policy governance. I do need access to sharing, and I have it. Great. Okay. Which one do I want to go to? I'm not sure. Let's do that one. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. Slideshow, play from start. Okay, so that's me. Now you can actually see my name. So what I'd like to do first, I met with you in November, and we kind of talked broadly about what policy governance is in preparation for your consideration of moving forward. And then I met with several of you in September to walk through a policy governance 101. I'm not doing all of that again tonight, but I am going to do a very high level brief review just so that we're in the same place and you know what the next steps are. And then, as Adrienne said, tonight we're going to tackle one of those policies, make it yours, make it belong to your supervisory union, and then set a date for when we can do the rest of those policies. Good to go? So, as I said when we met earlier, the role of the board is to ensure that schools are run well. You're governing what's happening, but you're not actually running the schools. You all have day jobs. You hire a superintendent to actually manage the day-to-day operations of the schools, and that delineation of roles and responsibilities is a core tenet of policy governance. It actually is what makes things run smoothly once you have your policies developed. The board is very clear about their work. The superintendent then is very clear about what the board expects, and can direct his staff and actually act with efficiency on the day-to-day operations, reporting back to the board and being accountable to the board for what his decisions are. There are 3 core beliefs, core roles for board. One is you were elected by your communities, and therefore it is important that you remain connected to your voters, to your communities, to your citizens, because they elected you to carry through their wishes. Now, you can't necessarily know what every single person is thinking on every single issue. But if you're connected to your community, you know what their values are. You know what direction they would like their schools to go. And that's what you've been elected to carry out. You then, as a board, develop policy that basically encompasses those values in a way that the superintendent knows what exactly it is that you want them to do. And you monitor those policies and hold the superintendent accountable for following that direction you give. And that primarily is the role of the board. There are some smaller pieces, but those are the primary roles of the board. There are 10 principles that govern policy governance. We're not going to go over all 10. We already have at one point. But we are going to focus tonight on policy sizes. You might remember that policies are a written expression, once again, of the values of your community and the values of your board. And you start writing policies at the broadest level, and then you narrow down the policy to the point where you will feel comfortable with how any superintendent interprets it. Policies are not written in stone, just like you've been doing all along. You can change a policy. There's a process to changing a policy, and you have to follow that process, but you can change the policy. So if you develop a policy as we're working together, and you find that that policy is not quite getting you what you thought you were asking for, you can revise that policy and make it more specific so that you can get what it is that you're looking for. Change. Oh, there. A policy, again, tells the administration enough information so that it can get working on its task in accordance with the board's wishes. Not sure what's happening on my screen here, so let me do that and that'll work better. And that definition comes from the National School Board Association, and that remains the same even under policy governance. A soundly constructed policy tells the administration enough so it can get working on the task at hand and knows exactly what it is the board expects of them. There are 4 sections in the policy governance system, sections of policies. If you look at that circle on the right-hand side of the slide, the board writes policies for the superintendent, which is on the right-hand side of the circle. The executive limitations tells the superintendent, provides limits to the superintendent on how they can do their job. Not exactly what to do. We'll talk about that in a second. But within what boundaries, within what limitations you set that they can do their job. And the ends tells them exactly what it is you want them to achieve. What are the outcomes for your students and for your taxpayers supposed to be? On the left-hand side, which is where we're going to dip our toe tonight, the board also writes policies for how it governs itself and it writes a policy on how it connects with its superintendent, how it delegates to its superintendent. And tonight we're going to dip our toe into the governance policy. So very briefly again, Global Ends answers 3 questions. What benefits should your school district produce, for whom, and at what value or what cost? And that's probably the last policy we're going to write. However, you already have a lot of this work done, so it's actually for you going to be fairly easy. And the executive limitations addresses things that cannot be allowed. Now, people kind of get concerned about the wording of executive limitations if they don't understand the concept. It's a paradigm shift. You're not telling the superintendent what to do because you can't. In my time, being told what to do under COVID would never have been thought of by the board. Who knew COVID? Who knew that there was going to be a pandemic? Right now, in your time with Lane, things are chaotic at the federal level. And there are all kinds of comments about losing funds, losing the Department of Education, and at the state level, changes in supervisory unions. You can't tell him how to react under each of those because you don't even know what they are. It's not practical either. He needs to be able to make decisions that he knows are in the best interest of the values that you set. And therefore, the policy is worded, as that example shows you, in such a way that it says the superintendent shall not An example here is shall not operate without personnel rules that clarify rules for staff, provide for effective handling of grievances, and protect against wrongful conditions. In other words, you're laying those boundaries. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can see some faces. You're going to lay those boundaries so that the superintendent knows what it is you expect and can make the day-to-day decisions without having to call you every time a decision has to be made. You then will ask for reports on each of those policies, and you have those policies to fall back on. And if you decide that the superintendent has made a decision that you don't feel the policy addressed, you can rewrite the policy or add a section to the policy to make it even tighter for yourself. That's how the checks and balances work. That's how the superintendent is able to do their job according to what you want, but you don't have to have a crystal ball and know absolutely everything that's going to land on front of their desk. For those of you who aren't aware that there was a plane crash tonight in Toronto, this morning, and the plane flipped over. That hasn't happened before. There's not a playbook on that, but there is a playbook on how do you evacuate a plane, how do you assure the safety of passengers, how do you handle the emergency, all of that. So in other words, your policies are going to be kind of the playbook within which the superintendent can act, but not exactly saying this is what you do step 1, step 2, step 3. Does that make sense? So far, you with me? Not going too fast?
It's like an analogy Kelly can understand. I like it.
Good. I'm really sorry for that analogy, actually. That just came across my desk. But it is an example of how things happen that you can't possibly know about, but your values remain regardless of what happens. And it comes out in language that, for me as a behaviorist, bothered me until I understood it. It comes out in a language that says the superintendent shall not XYZ, shall not treat staff unfairly, for example, as opposed to what the superintendent shall do.
Can you go back to that slide where you had the sample language?
Yes, there you go.
Because, and maybe this is, sort of, these are items that make sense if you work in education, but effective handling of grievances protect against wrongful conditions. I agree with those things, but they seem awfully vague to me, and it's unclear. Are these sort of technical terms in education that educators all have like common operating definitions?
Yes, not so much in education as much as it is in businesses that have unions. Wrongful conditions is a legal term. Effective handling of grievances. Grievances are, complaints by your staff. And rules for staff, for example, when do you have to show up to work? When do we expect you to be here? What are the rules that you have in place? What are the procedures that are in place in order to have a smooth running district? So, but you bring up a really good point, Julie, in saying, it's kind of vague. So how does this play out? And we're going to spend more time on this as we develop our relationship together. But for tonight, it plays out with, you would write a policy such as this, and underneath, the main part is that you're focusing on treatment of staff. And in this particular wording of this policy, you're talking about both paid and volunteer staff. And you want your staff treated in a way that they know what the personnel rules are. They know what rules exist for them. They know how to file a grievance if there is a grievance and how it's going to be handled, and it's fair and consistent. And they know that there is opportunity to speak up about anything they feel is a wrongful condition, and it's the superintendent's obligation under your policy to be seeking any wrongful conditions and fix them. What a wrongful condition might be, as the superintendent writes a report for you on this policy, they interpret what a wrongful condition might be. A wrongful condition might be termination without just cause or due process. A wrongful condition might be in Burlington, before we got a bond passed, I had staff teaching and kids learning in classrooms that were 45 degrees in weather like you're facing right now, because the boiler was so out of date, it just wasn't keeping up. And like we used to like to say, it heated the outside better than the inside of the building. That's kind of a wrongful condition, to have your staff and your students in that type of situation. So a wrongful condition could be poor building conditions. Those are the types of things that are wrongful conditions. Your superintendent, when you have your policies written, is going to write an interpretation of each one of those policies, what they believe you meant by this. And again, this is just one example of many. So it's difficult to pull one out separate from the others, because it doesn't really stand alone. It's a comprehensive package. When you get that interpretation, if you don't feel that it's speaking to what you intended it, you as a board, as a whole, intended it to say, then you'll clarify it further and put in some additional words to help give that clarity to it. Does that make sense? Did I say too much?
No, it makes sense. It seems though like rather that, at least for the staff that are covered by a collective bargaining agreement, these aren't so much personnel rules as they are products of the collective bargaining process. And then, maybe non-unit staff have a separate
a personal handbook or something like that. Mm-hmm. How do we handle snow days is a good example of personnel rules. Those aren't necessarily in the collective bargaining agreement, but in every school district, and I see many of you are virtual. I don't know if you just had your second snow day board meeting in a row. Sorry about your cancellation of the last one. It could be that, your teachers and your instructional staff, your school-based staff, are going to have to make up that snow day, whereas your year-round staff, school secretaries, administrative assistants, central office folks might have they don't have days to make up, so they often will have to choose whether they're taking a vacation day or if they're going to come in, or if they have approval of their supervisor to do some work from home. That's, what are your rules around that? It shouldn't have to be guessed at. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, clarity is kindness, as Brené Brown
Exactly.
says. Yeah.
I think I'm going to steal that phrase, if you don't mind. Clarity is kindness. Yes.
It's not mine. It's Brené Brown's.
That's right. It is. But I think I'll steal it. Thank you. Okay. Let's keep going. This is an area that often kind of becomes a sticking point. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on it. Okay. When we get to the parts where the board is figuring out how it's going to do its own work, it starts by looking at how it connects to the superintendent. You hire, as a school board, a superintendent, and the superintendent is your sole official connection to the operational organizations. If you decide you want to start giving directives to the business manager, to the curriculum director, to the principals directly, then you have now undermined the superintendent's ability to run an efficient school district. So it has to be really clear that your connection is the superintendent, and it's the superintendent that you're going to hold accountable. The superintendent then has to give directives to the staff who report to him that I just mentioned, and he holds them accountable according to what you've told the superintendent your values are. The other area here talks about how only official acts of the board are binding on the superintendent, which basically means that it's not a single board member, whether you're chair or anybody else, who tells the superintendent what your values are. It's got to be acts of the board through written policy, and then it's perfectly clear to everybody. There's not the opportunity for confusion that can arise if individual board members wish to give decisions or instructions that the whole board is not aware of and does not necessarily sign on to. might. And if they do sign on to it, then the whole board can put it in policy and move forward that way. Clarity, once again, is kindness. And then the fourth area is, how are you going to do your job? This is about how the board governs. What is the board job description? I have it in yellow because we're going to work on that one tonight. How are your agendas built? What is the board chair's role? Another place where it's really good to have clarity around what your board chair is allowed and not allowed to do on behalf of the board. The board chair might be a sole voice to the superintendent, but still has to be speaking for the board. And putting that clearly into policy is helpful. What is the board member's code of conduct? VSBA also has a code of conduct. It's really basically the same thing, as you'll see, and you'll adjust it for you. What are your committee principles if you have committees? And if you have any investments, what is your investment policy? So this is the work of the board, and just putting down in paper, on writing, what you all agree the work of the board is and how you're going to govern. So the board job description, this is one of the policies. There are several policies. There are basically 8 executive limitations policies in the template. There is one ends policy. There are between 2 and 5 delegation policies. And I think there are 5 or 6 board, well, I just showed you on the other slide, so I guess it's more like 8 board policies. Together, through a blitz process where you have something to work from, a template to work from. This has been in existence for 30 years and is well researched now and used by school districts as well as nonprofits and businesses. So starting with what's already known out there, we're going to use a blitz process to walk through each of the policies and modify them so that they match what TRSU believes for its schools and its children. We're going to start tonight by doing this one together. And the handout that Adrian mentioned is the whole policy of 4.2 all on one page. There are actually 7 subsections under what you see on this page. I took the liberty of taking the template and plugging in the names of your towns, your districts, and that's just so that it makes sense to you. That's not something you necessarily have to do. And we're going to walk through each section at a time, and I'm going to ask you. And I have each section on a slide. So if you have the handout, great. If you don't have the handout, you will see the slide. And I'm going to ask you, does this resonate with your SU? And is there something missing in it? Is there something that needs to be changed in it? And it doesn't need to take us a really long time. However, it will take us however long you need it to take us. So we're not going to be rushed through it. This is the first one to show you what the rest of our process is going to look like. Now, I got the impression that not everybody who's online actually has the handout. Is that true? Is there anybody, would it be helpful if I just quickly showed you each of the sections and then come back and walk through it?
Jeff, your mic's hot.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't have a handout. I was going to say I didn't get it.
All right, Jeff, thanks. So I'm just going to briefly show you what each section is so that you have a concept of what this entire policy is about. Then we'll come back and walk through it. So this is what I described as the broadest part of the policy. And underneath it, it says the TRSU board has a direct responsibility 4.2, which is the policy, 0.1, to create and maintain a linkage. We're going to dig into the words later. 0.2 is to create and maintain governing policies. 0.3 is to be familiar with all the required policies. 0.4 is to gain assurance, or in other words, to hold accountable a successful organizational performance on ends and executive limitations. This is where you're saying that you are going to hold your superintendent accountable. Whoops, sorry. Point 5, some boards don't do this, and that's why I put it in italics, are you a board who wants to advocate for legislative change that could impact public education? So that's something that we'll consider. Point 6, you're determining the expenditure of surplus funds. That's actually a law in Vermont. The superintendent cannot determine how to spend any surplus funds. Only the board can determine. In other words, are you giving them back to taxpayers? Are you using them for some construction projects? Are you investing in a new curriculum? How would you like to do that? That's a board authority, power given by the state of Vermont. And determine the expenditure of long-term reserves, which are kind of phasing out these days. But if you have some long-term reserves, like maybe a capital fund, that again is up to the board. So those are the areas of board job description. Okay. So walking through, again, I talked about how policy starts at the broadest level, but if this alone were your policy of your board job description, back to, was it Julie who was talking? What she was saying, what does this mean? This only talks about your hiring, negotiating a contract with, and setting compensation for, and that you're going to ensure appropriate organizational performance. It's not enough. It's not enough to really let the board know what your tasks are that are ahead of you. So that's why it's at the beginning and it moves in to a new section that starts to delineate those particular tasks. So let's come back to that front one at the very end of these individual ones. So this language says the TRSU board has direct responsibility to create and maintain the link between the ownership and the operational organization to represent the informed voice of the owners. Is anyone willing to jump in and kind of interpret that formal language? Ownership, operational organization, informed voice of owners.
I assume it means that we are sort of the liaison between the school district and the community.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So this is your responsibility. This policy says it's your responsibility to be that liaison, to create the link between your community and maintain the link. Policy governance has a few vocabulary words like ownership that is sprinkled throughout, but it's really talking, and there's a whole session we could do on who is your ownership. It's really talking about who is it that elected you. And at some point during the course of the year, we may want to spend a little bit of time defining ownership further, but for now, think of it as your communities. So it's up to you to create and maintain a link to your communities and the operational side, which is your superintendent, in order to represent the informed voice of the owners. They elected you to do this. They assume that you are making decisions with their thoughts in mind. So therefore, this linkage includes seeking the input on both ends and ethics or values. So you're talking to your community members, educating your owners on issues that impact the organization. You're headed out for a budget vote right now, a good example of educating your owners on the issues that you're facing. It's not just about money, it's about, enrollment. It might be about a new curriculum. It might be about a new model at the high school. What is it? What issues are impacting you that your owners need to know about? Reporting out to your owners at your annual meeting. At the minimum, you'll be reporting out to your annual owners or to your owners on how you've done over the past year on your organizational performance. You have to do an annual report. And throughout the year, ideally, you're reporting if there are other things. For example, if you're having a curriculum discussion, when that decision is made, you're announcing that that decision is made. There's opportunity for input along the way, and then you make a decision, and then you report out that decision. And fourth thing, and your linkage you are ensuring that owners and other stakeholders might include your staff, even your students, can bring non-governing issues to the board, but then they understand the process for getting their issue addressed. So again, the board's not going to step into operational means, but the board ensures that the people who come to speak to you in public comment understand that you heard it and that you're holding the superintendent accountable and what the process is for their complaints to be taken seriously or responded to. First, are there any questions on this? And then I will ask, is there anything missing from this that along the link of between you and your communities and the school district?
The only question I have, I like this a lot. The only question I was thinking is the accountability aspect of it. You know, how is the board either because it wouldn't be individual members. How is the board held accountable for these?
I missed a word there. How does the board help?
Or how the accountability? How are we?
How is the board accountable for this? Mm-hmm. Basically,
exactly. Yeah. I know Lane will have an ends report that he has to provide to show that we're being accountable for our responsibilities.
So it's a really, really good question. And it's not the same type of process that the superintendent has. At least annually, if not more often, the board will revisit its own policies. Generally, I recommend a schedule throughout the year where you have an opportunity to pull up a policy at a time and you discuss it. Are we following this? Do we all know what it means? Do we all agree what it means? And I've actually created some tools. The Barstow board used one, I think, tonight. It's Monday. I think they're using it tonight. That is a very simple, you have an opportunity for discussion. You note down if you have any questions about this, if it isn't clear, if you want to change anything about this, you note down if you, maybe some examples of where you followed this. Like you might note, okay, we had I heard talk earlier about a public forum around the budget, or I'm not sure, Elaine, what you called that process. That was a pretty cool process. I remember you talking about that. So I forget what you call that opportunity to talk with the public, but those would be examples of seeking input and educating owners. Your annual meeting is an example of reporting to owners. So you'll just kind of keep it alive and report out to yourselves. The new Vermont standards has some board standards in it, and it's actually more difficult. It's actually easier for a policy governance board to meet the standard of self-accountability than it is for a non-PG board, because you will have a process where you're discussing this, noting it, changing it or leaving it and moving on, but at least you're reviewing it. And that's where your accountability is.
That's all I have.
I just have a question, and maybe it's going to come out throughout the process, but I'm imagining sitting here twice a month, because once for TRSU and once for the Ludlow Mount Holly board, or Green Mountain, depending on who we are. Elaine saying, I sought input by doing this, and I educated by doing this, and that's obviously not what's going to happen. That would be tedious and too much. So what does that
look like?
Reporting look like, I guess? So I don't know how detailed to be in my thoughts about this until I know what I'm a very, I need to see the outcome before I can go back and look at the process. And so this is really hard for me.
Yeah, I do understand that. And even whatever we settle on tonight, before we finish everything, you can go back and revisit anything. And then, like I said, afterwards you can too. But I do understand it's kind of what's the whole thing before I get this specific. But to answer your earlier question, first of all, this isn't really, I'm sorry to have given an example of Lane's budget forums. This isn't really about what your superintendent is doing. This is the board job description. What are you doing? You have public input. You might have budget specific sessions where people can come. You have an annual meeting. You have public input is really D, where people can come to you and bring non-governing issues, usually in the form of complaint, possibly in the form of a suggestion that's not appropriate for the board to respond to, but you have set up a process so that they can come forward, and then you assign it to the superintendent and ask for a follow-up on it. So this is something that the board actually says, what have we done this year? I had a board develop a communications plan where after they identified exactly who their owners are, they said, where are they? And they discovered that many of them are at the local dump on Saturday morning. So once a month on Saturday morning, a board member or two, usually two, headed down to the dump and just kind of hung out there. They realized that many people came to sports activities. So they made sure that a couple of board members were always present at sporting activities that people could come to. Those are ways of, you might hold an official, the work you just did on Portrait of a Graduate, there was an awful lot of seeking owner input regarding the values of your education system through that process. It's another really good example. You did it kind of before this, so I don't know how much board involvement was in that, but you're not going to redo it. You're just going to reaffirm it as you go forward. Does that help?
Yes. Ish. Yes.
I'm able to talk a lot. That doesn't mean I always hit your question. So don't worry about rephrasing your question if I miss it.
It's just, it's seeing the picture and then I'm a backward thinker. That's all. But
Sure.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I totally get that. Actually, as I was learning policy governance, I was kind of a backwards thinker too. And this is going to all come together for you. And you'll have many opportunities to go back and ask questions. So in regarding your linkage to the ownership, is there anything in this policy that at this time you think is missing? Do you agree that basically it's up to you to connect to your communities and represent them? It's up to you. And in order to do so, you need to be talking to your communities. You need to be educating them. You need to be reporting out to them on performance. And you need to continue to have public comment and opportunities for people to bring forward issues. Are we in agreement on that?
Yeah.
Okay. This one's a slightly longer one. So this section, 4.2.2, talks about the fact that in order to do this, you're going to have policies that address the broadest level of all organizational decisions and situations. You're going to have a policy in the area of ends. You're going to have policies in the area of executive limitations, which again establishes the limitations within which Lane can do his job. You're going to have policies on how you're going to communicate and delegate power, or authority is a better word, to Lane, and how you're going to hold him accountable for that delegation. And then you're going to have the policies we just talked about on how you're going to govern as a board. Any questions or concerns about going forward with this policy?
No, this is just saying we'll have the policies.
Exactly. And what the areas of your policies are going to be.
Okay.
And I do want to pause here. And when we're talking about policies here, we're really talking about the policy governance policies. You still will be responsible to have the legally required policies beyond this. And we'll talk a little bit later in our process together, not tonight, about how those coincide. But for example, you are legally required to have a harassment policy, so you will have a harassment policy. It doesn't necessarily fit into this, but it's kind of a subtopic, for example, of treatment of staff which is one of the executive limitations, and treatment of students, which is another executive limitations. So we'll talk some more about that later. I don't want to confuse you now, but this does not replace your entire policy manual. You will keep your required policies because they're required, but it may replace some of the ones that were not required and will be subsumed into these policies. Stick with me on that. Okay, now we have the last of them. Number 3 is not just that you're going to write the policies, but that you're going to be familiar with them. And I'm going to give you a way to get familiar with them, practice that I recommend that boards do, and it'll help you become very familiar with the policies that are in effect. You're going to get assurance of successful organizational performance on ins and executive limitations. What you are saying here is you are going to expect your superintendent at the schedule that you design that he will give you a report on how he is achieving, how he interprets each policy, and then how he is achieving or not achieving it. And that's again for a different night. But what you're saying here is you are agreeing that part of your job is to hold the superintendent accountable for what you're saying you want for your ins, for your students, and the executive limitations. So 3 and 4, any questions on those? Concerns? Disagreement?
No.
Thank you. I only see a little bit at a time, so I appreciate somebody giving me a verbal answer so I can move on. So number 5, advocate for legislative change. Is the TRSU board one that does legislative advocacy? Is this something you would like to keep in your board job description?
I've only been on a few years and I haven't seen the TRSU be active. I know that the GM it has a legislative committee that will be active, but I don't see it on this level. Has there been one before?
I don't think there ever has, and I've been doing this for a very long time. But I don't, just because we haven't been doing it doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. And I personally think in our current situation, there should be something, and I also don't have time to do it. So I hate to be the person that like says, yeah, we got to do it, but somebody else do it.
So it doesn't have to be a committee. It could be something as simple as on your agenda, you ask for somebody, it could be your superintendent you ask, it could be a board member you ask to bring forward any legislative issues that you should be aware of. All of you hopefully get the VSBA weekly updates. That keeps you apprised of what's happening legislatively in the state. It lets you know if there's a need for some legislative advocacy to occur. And just by even acknowledging that exists, opens the door for your board to say, hey, I don't know if I want to go from 100 school districts to 5 school districts. Should TRSU say something at an upcoming hearing? You could at least have that discussion because it came forward. Do you see what I mean? So it's not something that you have to set up a committee for, and advocacy can mean so many different things. You could say to your superintendent, go forth and share our views. Your superintendent could say, I'm going to be testifying on X, Y, Z. Is there anything in particular this board wants me to note? It could be the board itself sends somebody to a hearing, or simply you're just watching it and deciding when it's your time to speak up. Often it is more often the school district board than the SU board, so that's not unusual, but you probably want to be aware of it.
Janine, I'm just having Lane put up everybody's faces so that we can discuss.
Okay.
I don't know if that's possible. She's presenting. Oh,
There we go,
there you
sorry.
go.
So I don't know what other people's thoughts are on this. I mean, right now our current practice is Lane gives us an update on anything going on legislatively during his report. Do you guys want to kind of maybe make it its own little subsection, like specifically, so if there's any discussion we want to have about it, it kind of still stays in his report, but we're a little more active on it? What are your thoughts? If we don't want to have like a formal committee.
I think,
Adrian, we already have one in Green Mountain. Would it make sense if we did it as a TRSU instead of just a Green Mountain? I mean, it's all the same with state and fed legislation going around.
I'm happy to do
I
whatever.
missed the first part of what you said, Scott. Sorry. Can you just repeat the first couple words?
We already have it set up in Green Mountain where we have a committee, and it would just be kind of cool if maybe, Ludlow, Mount Holly had a couple people join in on our committees, because it's all one. I mean, we're all fighting for the same stuff. Your school in Ludlow, Mount Holly, or our school in Chester, Cavendish. It's still the feds and the state stuff. We all should be one big community in this thing.
So are you proposing taking the GM legislative committee and moving it into a TRSU level committee?
I think that would be smart.
What does everybody else think about that? It's a separate committee outside of.
Right. I'm just thinking, currently Ludlow Mount Holly doesn't have it. So if TRSU adopted it, somebody would be representing and we'd be all happy, and I'm sure it would be lovely. I'm thinking from your point of view, though, if you already have it as a Green Mountain board, taking that away and putting it at a TRSU level might upset some of your board members, and I certainly wouldn't want that. And I certainly don't want to speak for our entire board and create something where it's like Scott is saying, we'd be sort of doubling the efforts of something that really is just for our entire community. So that's my only thought. I like the idea. I'm just.
Can you say a bit more about what the committee does in Green Mountain?
So currently,
Go ahead.
Go
Go ahead.
we're just getting back up and started because obviously they were out of session and then just stuff. But it's set up, it's a new committee as of last year. And what we had initially anticipated we would do is everybody would kind of look at the bills that were education related that we each had our own personal, like feelings on, or interest in. And then we would be working with the superintendent. If something came up that we felt impacted our district or we felt strongly within our district about it, there would be opportunity to talk to Lane about it if he was, going to be testifying, or if we wanted to go up and testify or had that opportunity. It's more of, I want to say, like, I would say more of an action committee, but it was geared more to help educate our members on the legislative bills and the process, just to increase our activity. Jeff?
I don't know if we should move it completely to TSRU, because we have board members that want to hear updates from Lane that aren't on this call. I don't want to take it away from Green Mountain and just put it in TSRU. I think we should maybe have it in both, or leave it up to the schools.
And do you want to have a separate, what do you think about a separate committee at the TRSU level, or more of just a reporting at the TRSU level? And then if like Ludlow Mount Holly at some point wants to develop their own committee,
Right.
There could be more of a like reporting at the TRSU level as opposed to committee actions.
Right, not maybe just reporting at TSRU. Maybe the committees in school.
And then so maybe, Ludlow, if they want to at some point, can develop their own and.
I think, I think we should make sure that it gets on our agenda for March and discuss it. And then, we could, like Jeff said, report to the TRSU. And then if we want to work more closely, then there's always that opportunity.
So sound reasonable?
And
I support that. I think our board needs to discuss it sort of internally, and then decide, if we want to create a parallel committee, or if we want to if we would support the idea of having a duplicated, I guess, committee at the TRSU level, I think we need to probably collect more thoughts from our colleagues on that.
And I do think something I was going to bring up later in public comments, one of our members wants to and has joined the Rural School Alliance. I'm going to get the name wrong. So I think it would sort of fit hand in hand with that as well. And so I think there would be support for it. I just don't want to speak for the board at the moment. Yeah.
And the only thing I was going to say is I think, especially given the times, but even if we weren't going through it, the importance of being active at that level is critical. The state lawmakers, they're really good people and they mean well, but they are disconnected. That's why, when people vote down a budget, they're not impacted by it, right? They may hear about it, but it's a little bit different. What they are impacted by are people having conversations with them, joining into their listening sessions and providing them the idea, the feedback, and the concerns. So I think this would be a really wonderful thing to get it up, get it running.
Janine, could you put up the wording again so that we can, I don't know if it's something.
My recommendation, listening to you, is to include it. You can always change it. It just means that should a legislative change come up that your board feels strongly that it wants to advocate for, it can. It will also be in your annual review that you say you're doing it through your school districts or through Green Mountain because it more directly impacts them, et cetera.
Is everyone in agreement that we'll leave 4.2.5 in?
I am.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we just can't see you. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Okay, so we'll leave that in.
And 4.2.6, as I said, and 2.7, these are both in Vermont statutes, actually, that part of your job description is to determine the expenditure of surplus funds and the expenditure of long-term reserves. Any concerns about those two?
Do they apply at the TRSU level, though? I know at the GM level, talking about surplus funds, but I don't know if we've had that conversation at the TRSU level.
That's fine.
Actually,
TRSU budget seems like it.
Isn't the budget then dispersed to the separate boards?
Find out.
So I don't know.
I believe that you're correct, Adrian. It's the Green Mountain Board and Ludlow Mount Holly boards that actually get the surplus funds back. You don't keep surplus funds and you don't keep long-term reserves. That would be done at the school district level since you're in SU.
So is it usually kind of split up based upon the size of the district or however they've agreed?
However it came into the SU, that formula is already set up.
Yeah.
It basically rolls over to the next year.
All right.
And reduces for what needs to be collected.
So I don't think 4.26 or 7 would even apply to us.
But do we have to have some language that we are monitoring? What was one of the words we used here? And I don't want to say monitoring, but that we're just keeping it on our radar, that our individual boards are determining the expenditure of surplus funds and long-term reserves. I don't know that that's necessary or not.
It's the expenditure that Adrian points out isn't really an SU responsibility. You could, if you wanted to keep it on your radar, you could change it to say, report out surplus funds to the school districts for their use, for their decision, report out. Long-term reserves, I can't imagine that you have a long-term reserve. But you might. So I can think of a situation, for example, in Rutland Northeast, we had one long-term reserve that was at the district level for the purposes of an after-school programming fund. And each district contributed to that fund as it could, but it actually was held at the supervisory union level. That's one example of a long-term reserve fund that might be held at the supervisory union level.
Would that also include things like, for instance, somebody leaves in their will like a trust fund situation for the school, and that's probably not the right word, but for the
Yeah.
library, and then that money is held and we're able to tap in and buy books at certain
Yes.
schedules and.
Yes.
For the
Yes,
district.
and so what you're saying is that's a board decision. You're making it clear that that's in your job description, how you're going to spend that. Now, the person who left you the money may send, you can only spend this on books that start with the letter A, but you still have to officially pass the motion that says, Lane, go buy books that start with the letter A.
But at the
Right.
district level.
But at
not
the,
at-
right, again, you're right, everything that I'm like, for instancing in my head is at the district level, but I still, I don't know that if we need to, I like the idea of,
We can also change it though, like
update,
if I'm understanding this process right, like when the TRSU evaluates 4.2.
Yes.
If we feel like we need more information from Lane regarding, like the long-term reserves, what's coming to mind actually is the buses. The buses are held at the TRSU level. That might be something that if, bus information. But I think the surplus funds, I think that one actually could just be removed because that's.
Well, what if you leave that one in there for the same example you just gave? So you have the buses at the SU level, which is common, and your SU budget into which Green Mountain paid a certain amount and Ludlow Mount Holly paid a certain amount, has a surplus at the end of the year, and Lane comes to you, or your transportation coordinator, if you got one, comes to you and says, I'd really like to purchase another bus. You're determining to use that budget money that wasn't originally budgeted because you know it's going to benefit both of your school districts, member school districts.
So which one would be surplus or?
So there
long-term?
you're actually determining your surplus funds on a district level for something that is benefiting both member school districts. So I like your idea, Adrian, of leave them, revisit them in a year. Did anything happen this year? Has a situation come up that fits TRSU?
Okay, I'm fine with that.
so do we change the word determine then to review the expenditure of?
Well, we would review the whole policy.
Right.
And then
Right,
if-
but she's suggesting changing 0.6 to review and determine. How about review and determine? Because if there are surplus funds, and if you do have district-wide expenditures that you can expend it on, then you have to decide if you're going to do that or send it back to the town districts.
I'm just, maybe I'm struggling with the difference between the surplus and the long-term reserves, like needing them both, but I'm happy, or, the board, obviously, not just me, would, to leave them both and address it next year. If they don't apply, then we can either get rid of or one, both, or change them. What does everybody else think?
Leave them.
I agree. If we can come up with hypotheticals that are realistic, that seem like they may apply. I mean, if they're irrelevant in a particular year, they're irrelevant. But if there are, some hypotheticals people can come up with that are somewhat realistic, it seems like we ought to just have them.
It also might be good the next time we review to have Cheryl chime in.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I'm also worried about in 365 days not having the benefit of this conversation to remind us of why we kept it or why we didn't, and
Yeah.
because
All right, so everyone in agreement, we'll keep them then.
keep them as it.
Yes.
It's fine.
Okay. There is one additional piece of the board job description. I did not give it a sub-bullet. It's more of a reminder, but we recommend that you put it in this policy, that you also have some following non-governing pieces of a job description, and that you are ultimately responsible for negotiating union contracts. It's in the Vermont state law. You may delegate it to a lawyer. You may delegate it to your superintendent. You may delegate it to a negotiations team. But ultimately, you act on it. It comes back to you, and you negotiate or do the final decision on the negotiated union contracts. You also have a job to conduct fair hearings as a quasi-judicial board. So if you have a student discipline matter, if you have a staff discipline matter, these come to you. And that, again, is a Vermont assignment of responsibility, that it comes to the board level. So I recommend that this goes at the end of the policy, as you can see on the handout, even though it's not a 4.2.8. These are just additional. It's kind of like a, oh yeah, we have to do this too. Questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone
Well-
else? I just can't see anybody, so I can't see faces.
I know.
Don't see anybody.
Okay, all right.
Congratulations. You just created your first policy. Now you know what your job description is. That's awesome. So what does it mean next for us? Here's the steps that we're going to be going through over the next several months, through the summer or beyond, whatever it is that you need. You've made the decision to implement policy governance. The next step is to develop all of the policies so that you do have a sense of everything as a whole. And to do that, we're going to need to schedule a process and a time to do that. So we're going to do that before I leave tonight. And then once those policies are developed, you're going to start applying them. Your monitoring reports are going to begin, and you're going to evaluate your superintendent based upon policy compliance. So all those things kick into place once your policies are developed. Then you're also going to create an annual work plan that reflects your policies and what topics your agendas are going to cover. So your agendas will reflect your annual work plan. So for example, under ownership linkage on an annual work plan, you might say at a minimum in February, you're having, maybe in December, January, and February, you're having discussions with your community about your spending plan, your budget. In September, you're going to have open houses and invite the community to provide some input at that time, whatever it is. And then your agendas will reflect that. Your agendas will reflect your timeline for monitoring reports and policy review, et cetera.
Is
At
it
some point, yeah.
we develop in July at the TRSU board meeting, the calendar, is that the same things? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It really is.
Okay.
You're going to determine your owners and develop an owner linkage plan somewhere along the way together. And we're going to look at your work, A Portrait of a Graduate, and determine if you have enough information to develop your ends policies, if you have enough owner input, or if you need to update it at all. And you'll ultimately develop an ends policy that says what the outcomes of a student in TRSU. Actually, at the SU board, it's slightly different. At a town district board, what are the outcomes at the Green Mountain School District or the Ludlow Mount Holly School District? What are the outcomes those students will receive, and at what cost to the community? Whereas TRSU is more focused on assuring, your ends policy is more focused on assuring that your district boards have what they need. They have the special ed services, the transportation services, the financial services, et cetera. So yours is going to look a little bit different than a town district board. So those are all the steps that we have to do. And then just to let you know, there is an opportunity if you want to go deeper to taking an online course in policy governance. We're also, VSBA and I are going to be offering a one-day PG 101 if you have any new board members coming on board that you want to bring up to speed. We're going to talk about how you can spend time getting to know your policies and what a practice scenario might look like, having your policy manual present, and then we're going to spend some time on what a monitoring report should look like and how you evaluate it for compliance. And that's what we're going to be spending the next several months doing. Very next step, though, is to choose a date for full policy development. You could do a section at a board meeting at a time, but it will take you a long time to go through it all to do it that way. This was already an hour, and I don't know, you're a very kind audience. I don't think your eyes have glazed over too much, but they can. It's better to take a chunk of time if you can find one, whether it's a 5 to 9 p.m. work session, a Saturday morning, whatever it is that lets you walk through it and develop your policies in a chunk. And then you get that overall picture of what they look like.
What do you guys think? Do you want to try and do like 1 or 2 work sessions and just get it taken care of? Because I do think, I mean, and this was a fairly controversial one. I think if we get into ones that people are going to have some strong opinions or thoughts on, it could take, a couple of hours, what do people say?
This would be a whole board, so it'd be like a special meeting.
Yeah, special meeting.
I think we should do them in evenings. I don't commit to things after Friday evening.
Can we wait till I would like to wait till after the budget stuff.
So after March?
I think so. That's my instinct. I want to kind of be laser focused on the work related to that right now.
So beginning in April then? Do you want to have a special meeting or 2 in April, or a special meeting in April, special meeting in May?
Could we do, when is our March meeting or our April meeting? Sorry. April.
The 18th of April would be the no, sorry, I'm lying to you.
April
3rd.
Is that a reorganization meeting for you?
March would be.
Okay.
Would March?
Would it be possible to do, I'm hearing Julie, and I'm also manifesting all of us passing our budgets. Is it possible to think of like the last week in March as a possibility? That way we could have one under our belt before our April meeting? Because I feel like going our March meeting, our April meeting, it just feels really long.
So like the 27th of March?
Sure.
Let me check.
What do you think about the 27th of March? On a Thursday, special meeting, what do you think? How long are you proposing for this, Janine?
So if we're going to do it in 2 sessions, I bet we could do 2 hours a session. I'm thinking that executive limitations is probably going to cause the most discussion. So maybe we kick off with the board policies, and I bet we could get those. I'd like to think that we could get those done in 2 hours. And then the next session, work on the executive limitations and start to approach the ends and see if we could do that, see if it works.
The process by then.
Maybe 2 hours.
Okay. So
March 27th, I have a conflict, but if enough other people, I have other nights that week, but that particular evening is not good for me.
I'm flexible about night, but I don't know Lane's from.
I have another board training on the 24th, just so you know. Any other night that week can work, but I'm working with another board on the 24th.
The 25th or the 26th would work for me.
25th is wide open for everybody.
25th.
Yeah.
Jeff, Scott, Caitlin?
Oh yeah, 25th.
25th. And is it possible to meet at 5? Do a 5 to 7 or not?
I would not, I'm leaving work at 5.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
6.
And my only caveat is if I have a baby at that day, I won't be here, but I can't predict that at the moment.
So Jeff, and Caitlin, did that work for you?
Yeah, works for me.
Okay, and can somebody let the David? Is that his name?
Sydney.
Sydney.
Oh, Dave Martin. Dave Martin,
Yeah, I
yes.
just, as, as many people, having the alternates, I think, be involved as well, so that, people are versed in this if they have to sit in.
When Sydney posts it, I'll try to make sure that we forward it to him, but Julie and Caitlin, can you keep my brain on that?
I got it in my notes as well.
Okay, so we're gonna do a special meeting March 25th from 6 to 8. Is that correct? Right. And then do we want to do one the following month? Just while we're all talking about plans in April?
I'm
Assuming we're all still on the board, but
right.
either way.
I would just steer clear of the week of break, which is the 14th
You got it.
through the whatever, if 18th. So maybe the week of the 21st through the 25th.
When is the GM meeting? For some reason, it's not loading on my calendar.
Should be the 17th.
The 17th?
So you're meeting
Is it-
during break.
Unless you,
Oh, we usually bump it.
Yeah.
So we'll either end up meeting probably the 10th or the 24th.
That
and
works.
then- Sorry?
That works for me.
Which one worked for you?
The 24th.
24th. The only caveat is since GM, a lot of times what happens when our meeting falls on a vacation week, it gets moved. We move it up or back?
usually that, so towards the 24th.
Towards the 20th. So the 24th might be an issue.
Could we pick another day that week?
What, or the 20, do you?
22nd, the Tuesday seemed to be good for some reason, as I'm looking through. Don't know why.
I could do the 22nd.
I can do the 22nd.
22nd of April work for everybody?
Let me check.
Yes.
Good for me.
Okay,
Yep.
Would that be again at from 6 to 8?
yes. Okay,
And then March, we decided on the 27th.
5th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeannie, so the 22nd is going to be executive limitations.
You mean April 22nd? I think so, yes. Yes, I think we'll do it that way. And I'll get, basically I'll get the full packet draft to you in advance of the March meeting anyway, so that you do have a sense to see all of them. And then we'll walk through the board governance ones, those two, 3.0 and 4.0 on the March 25th meeting. And then we'll do the executive limitations on April 22nd. Okay.
And just to clarify, the March one will be in Cavendish and the Ludlow one will be here following our usual, if the meeting, our regular meeting is in that.
oh, in that month,
Right.
I see what you're saying. So
That's
wait, where are we? February, March, so it would be Cavendish
Yeah.
in March and then Ludlow. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is just a Kellyism. I'm not gonna, but I wonder if we could make an effort, if the weather were decent, to all be in a room together. Sometimes I just think it's nicer to have those conversations in the human form. I know not everybody can, and I absolutely get that. But sometimes it's just nice to be together.
I agree. It's hard. I have a spouse that travels for work, so it's hard for me often to be out, but I can aim for it now that we know the date so far in advance.
Right. And I just think sometimes, especially when we're doing work sessions like this, I feel like it's different. I don't know.
I think that's a reasonable request. I did have a question, Janine. So we got through that. Yes. Do we vote to accept it?
At the end of it, you're going to vote to accept everything as a package.
All at once, okay.
Yeah, because if you vote for this one out of turn, kind of, it makes it, so I think we'll wait till we have a full package and you'll vote on the full package.
Okay, perfect. All right. So our goal then is to be up and running by May, like with our policies, yes? Okay, and then Good, because then the next month we go into the next school year anyways. Wonderful. Yay. Awesome. All right. Any
And
questions?
I will be in your community on Thursday, correct?
Yes. for the
Green
Jan board.
Mountain.
Yeah.
And when I am able to come in person, I will do so. I'm working with several boards and I can't do them all in person. It's just, I can't go back and forth. But when I can, I look forward to seeing you in person the next time I have the opportunity.
Appreciate that. I know that you guys also will have like a clearer picture of what this is, you guys. can
Right,
talk
we'll
to the
see
board.
as we're
This is
getting,
something-
yeah, as we're swimming in the pond, then we'll have some ability to talk about it and really understand it. I think so.
All right, great. All right, is there anything else on your end, Janine?
No, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. All right, if there's nothing more about that, we'll move into our last public comments. Is there anyone on? No?
Can I just say one thing, because I promised I would. So at the last Ludlow Mount Holly meeting, we did have a conversation about the Rural School Community Alliance, and again, if I'm getting that wrong, there's a group who are sort of forming at this, to try to present, I guess, to the legislator. Dave Martin was very interested in it, and our board voted to join. It's a free group that's working towards, making change and making it, having our voice heard at the state level. So I think it goes along with what we were talking about earlier, but also he wanted to see if the TRSU would join forces and be a part of that group as well. And I don't, so I'm bringing it up. That's all.
Maybe at the next meeting, maybe Dave would want to come and present
Sure.
about it?
Yeah.
You think you would?
Yeah.
So let's put that on the agenda to have Dave present.
And it is legal. for the
Yes.
board to join as a board, yeah.
There's some helpful information that David circulated after our meeting that details the policy statements of that organization and what they, the issues that they're advocating for on behalf of small rural districts. So that was informative to me in terms of understanding like what the viewpoints and objectives were.
Is there any way we could get that? I'd love to see
I was
that.
just gonna say that we can forward all of those
Yeah.
emails.
I'll do that tomorrow.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
So we'll have Dave Martin at the next, on the next agenda to present, discuss. And Lane will send out the information ahead of time. Okay. All right, we did not, is there any other public comments? Sorry. So there were no policies adopted today. Our next meeting is going to be March 6th, 6 p.m. in Cavendish. And then we'll add on those next two, but just a reminder, it's March 25th we decided on. And that will be 6 to 8 also at Cavendish. Okay. There's no executive session. My thing just seems to end.
Yeah, they somehow.
Something's changed.
There's ours had that too. There's this big blank space, but yeah,
Oh,
then it's
okay.
there. I think it's because of the two,
Oh, it didn't fit.
right, the two graphic pieces pushes weirdness. We had the same issue the other night.
All right, so if there's nothing else, then motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Scott, seconded by Kelly, all in favor?
Do we need to board self-eval?
Oh, I'm sorry,
I know.
GM doesn't do it, so and it's throwing me off. Sorry, do you guys want to do the self-eval real quick? And then we can just,
We did a good job.
all right. Board members are given and have read the agenda and background materials prior to the meeting.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Board members are respectful to each other, the public, and the administration.
Yes.
Yes. Board members handled conflict openly and constructively.
Yes.
Board members focused on the role and responsibility of the board. And board members act as a team once a decision has been made and work collaboratively throughout the decision-making.
Yes.
We did a stellar
I
job.
think we did good.
Okay, all right, so Scott motioned to adjourn, Kelly seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned at 7:56.